In addition to the research based knowledge shared, understanding the lived experience is crucial. Today we are joined by Avonelle Hanley-Mills and Joy Abounds from Solve, sharing our lives, voices, and experiences. Avonelle will discuss Solve and the issue of mental health stigma, followed by Joy sharing some of her personal experiences. Note that we won't be having a separate Q&A after this session, but Avonelle and Joy will be joining the Q&A panels throughout the rest of the afternoon. Avonelle, I'll let you start things off.
You. Solve Sharing Our Lives, Voices, and Experiences is a program of Mental Health Association of San Francisco. Solve is a peer-run program, stigma elimination, education campaign, and speakers bureau. We are a diverse group of persons in the community, and Solve peer educators share their powerful mental health journey of triumph, challenges, successes, um, and stigma experience throughout their lives. The real life stories affirm mental health recovery is possible, and challenges do not define a person's worth. Many of the stories that Solve Peer Educator share is about stigma, and we focuses on three type of stigma: self stigma, public stigma, and structural stigma. And one of the reasons why we break down the stigma is because generally you hear, I felt stigmatized, but we're not, we don't hear exactly how was one affected by this particular type of stigma. And our self stigma is oftentimes influenced by society, what society imposed on us. And in our mental health journey, that's very crucial because oftentimes stigma does influences one to not seek medical attention, and in all cultures. And sometimes you'll hear someone say, in a person of African descent, a person of Latin descent, Asian descent, in my culture, it's in every culture that in terms of stigma of mental health exists. As a person born and raised in the Caribbean, there's that stigma. And I identify as an immigrant, and it is in the immigrant community as well. Because for me, coming from the Caribbean, filled with lots of community contact. And, I often tell people that it's very religious. We have a church on every corner, of every denomination, and mostly it's Christian. And, if the sun is shining, we say, thank you, Lord. If there's a thunderstorm, we say, thank you, Lord. um, so it's very based on, that type of support. However, we also have to include what the cultural base is as well. And understanding one's culture and how that support is given is critical. And so, really looking at how does stigma affect the older adult? As a person close to their 60s, I know I look 25. Um, I've definitely felt my aging in terms of my mental health and what do I need to do to maintain or improve my own mental health. And having a family who half of my family is over the age of 65, and my mother is 88. And the oldest person in my family, my aunt, maternal aunt, is 91. And having that experience lately, being a caregiver to my mother, who's very strong-willed, seeing how that her own mental health was affected because she um, had to have hip surgery from someone who is very active um, to not really being active, and what I needed to do to advocate on behalf of her own mental health, and really started to work with some of the the consumers in the rehab center because there wasn't someone talking to them about their own mental health and what that looks like, right? And I took in my dog, who she loves being pet, and that really helped just improve the self-esteem or self-concept of persons now not able to move, who were very active, including my mom. And so what I realize is we have to start talking. We have to start speaking. And in that generation, speaking about mental health, first, the vocabulary. Because when I told my mom mental health, she said, "What are you talking about?" I'm not crazy. I'm like, No, I'm not saying you're crazy. I'm saying that your mental health has declined because you're not doing as much activity as you used to. And, you're feeling not being mobile as you used to. Now you have to use a walker, which before she wasn't using a walker. And I signed her up for psychotherapy, and she refused. And then she didn't refuse. And I told her it's part of her treatment. um, and she did. She enjoyed it. Um, and most of the time she talked about me, but she told me that she talked about me. I don't think she did. But I think it's okay for us to encourage our older adults to engage in activities that in the past it was stigmatized as something being wrong with them, right? And my mother has never spoken to someone in terms of psychotherapy. She's never. And the fact that she was able to have those sessions, and they were virtual, and I'm really glad they were virtual, because I don't think I would have been able to get her to go. They were in her room and she felt safe. And I'm so happy that is part of a treatment plan right now. And so, solve, sharing our lives, voices, and experiences. How do we begin to share our story? And in all cultures, story sharing is how we have moved from generation to generation and sharing who we are. And this is how improving our mental health and increasing who we are mentally. And I'm almost 60, so I'm pausing. um, what does recovery look like as we get older? And that's the thing. The more we talk about it, the more we feel open and build our self worth in terms of seeking support. When we speak about it, we're sharing our story. We're opening up an avenue for others to give us suggestions and ideas and support. I learned that as I spoke about some of the challenges of sleep, that I had food allergies. Now, if I didn't speak about it, I don't think I would have known. And this was not from a doctor. This was actually a friend who was a nutritionist. And so as we share stories, I'm going to introduce Joy Abounds, who is one of our SOLVE speakers and has been speaking to about with SOLVE for a very long time. And Joy will share challenges, successes, and her journey in mental health.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for showing up and being here to listen to this incredible day of activity and knowledge being shared. Before I start my story, I would like to tell you that we are fortunate, all of us, to be alive. And despite all the problems, trials, and tribulations we go through, we are on this earth to go forward. Without further ado, I would like to say that once upon a time, back in another day and age, when I was in my mother's womb, there was some trauma going on at that time. There was some toxicity going on. And my mother discovered that her mother was going to be dying shortly. And due to this situation, my mother was traumatized over the situation that was occurring while I was inside her womb. I was traumatized and I was tossing and turning constantly, making it very difficult for my mother to carry me. Due to the fact that this was happening, I ended up being born and being a colic child, to double it up, and being a very problematic situation, being the first child in the family. Moving on, I matriculated into kindergarten that was supposed to be a positive experience and a happy experience for children like myself. I discovered that was the opposite because I drew a green apple and the rest of the class drew a red apple. I was ostracized and looked down upon and was reprimanded by the teacher, and my mother gave me a very difficult time. I grew up with a green apple tree in my backyard, and I ate green apples constantly all the time. But yet I was not accepted to draw a green apple. Okay, let's move on. Third grade happens, and I am considered to be a slow learner, what they called in my day dumb, D-U-M-B. I had to stay back because of my being dumb and did not get to move on. Therefore, I was very uncomfortable and hated school tremendously. Moving on to fifth grade, I was physically abused, and I'm not going into it. And my mother said, this is it. I'm taking my children out of the school because my brother and I both stayed back and we were not smart. So I went to regular public school from a private school into the sixth grade and made the honor roll. Just like that. Now tell me how that happened. All of a sudden I'm smart. Gee, okay. Moving on to high school, I was very unhappy with all the past history that I had experienced and didn't feel like I wanted to live anymore. Therefore, I moved on to looking for a way to take my life, and consequently, the medications were not available to me that I was looking for. So that went aside, and I desired and dreamed one day to leave East Coast Connecticut and get away from the racial tension and the discrimination that I, as a person of color, faced. And therefore, I did dream that California was in my future. And at the age of 21 years old, I landed from the airplane in San Francisco. And here I am today to talk to everyone about my life. Now, after I arrived, I was, flabbergasted because everything was so different. And so I was culture shocked by the differences of the East Coast and the West Coast. And I reinstated myself in college. I did graduate from college and, had no problems in school, and I wasn't really dumb. I was quite bright. I found out through all the years of being called a dummy and standing in the corner. I got a little bit uncomfortable with, everything being a newbie, having no friends, having no family here, being all alone. And I started to get interested in shopping. And when I was shopping, I was thrift store shopping. And I was collecting and what is now called the collector behavior, and in the past they called hoarding and cluttering, and ended up getting too much clothes and too much this and too much that. And I didn't realize that my apartment wasn't really big enough. So then I had to get storage and I had to move on to that. And in any case, I became problematic with a problem of too much stuff. And you know what that means. And that means that you could lose your apartment. And I had a problem in that situation, and that got ascertained. And, I am now moved on into a senior housing, and I am living in a different environment, and I have a very, very feng shui place. I try to be minimalist as much as I can because I don't like a lot of stuff anymore. So, what has happened on my journey? How have I survived the trauma, the drama, and toxicity? Well, I'm a strong person to begin with, and I'm very self sufficient and always been independent and single. And I think I've had to fend for myself all the time, and I never had a backup or a partner, and I've not been ever codependent. But I have the zest to survive and live. I really realize the older I get how important life is, and I need to wrap it up because my time is being told to me. So I would like to thank you very much and say thank you for listening, and I hope you got something out of it. Thank you.